Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hi, guys. Let's go. Intro. Insert. History Extra, subscribe, like. What was on the menu for ordinary Tudors? Ruth Goodman explains. So, oh, I thought, oh. Why the Tudors really ate and why it was healthier than you think. Jesus. All right, let's go.
Change are happening here. The beginnings of a major change are happening here, and it's going to reach out and change the British diet forever.
I saw a comment I get sometimes, like, that's the biggest water bottle I've ever seen. I drink a lot of water. I like water. It's good. And I hate always having to fill up my water or just getting a bunch of small water bottles and then having a million empty water bottles. So to answer people's question, yeah, it's a big water bottle, but I like it. So, and they're not too expensive. So, well, let's go. Stay hydrated.
Hello, I'm Ruth Goodman, and we're going to be talking today about Tudor food and drink. From rich stews and fresh-baked bread to preserved meats and pottage, Tudor food was shaped by the seasons and by social status. We'll find out what a typical day's diet looked like, from breakfast through to supper, and we'll discover why Tudor food wasn't quite as unhealthy as you might first assume.
What is that? Oh, it's a baby goat, I think. Anything in season?
The most important food for any Tudor was bread. But by bread, we often mean quite a range of things. Now, obviously, we'd expect there to be a loaf of bread, such as you might buy from an artisanal bake shop these days. And if you look here in our Tudor kitchen, you can see the oven where it was baked. But it didn't just mean that. The word bread covered quite a range of different styles of thing. And if you're in North Wales, such as we are today, many people were eating not that sort of baked in an oven bread, but rather oatcakes, as you can see up on this creel up here. So these are drying in front of the fire. They're cooked on a griddle. If you can't afford an oven, and if your grain is oat rather than wheat, because the weather here doesn't always ripen the wheat, you'll find the same in many upland areas of Britain, then oats are better done as a flat cake rather than trying to turn them into a traditional bread. They don't make very good bread, and of course not everybody's got an oven.
Where do oats come from? I probably should know that. But obviously, flour comes from wheat, which is grown on these straw-like grasses, and they're kind of at the tip. But are oats? Is there an oat plant? I feel like, does anyone know?
So if you are in one of these upland areas, in Wales, Scotland, the Pennines, wherever it might be, cooking on an open fire and having to manage with oats as your main grain, oat cakes were the solution. You make a sort of like porridge, and then you sort of spread it out on a flat bake stone. So once you've had them on your bake stone and you've done them on both sides, then you stand them up in some sort of frame to dry out. And in that way, you can keep them and keep them and keep them. It's one of the great advantages of oat cakes. They keep so well, they don't go stale like a loaf of bread does. In some areas, you get a sort of mix, part loaf of bread, part oat cake, things like bannocks, jannocks in another area of the country. It's quite a varied tradition of different sorts of breads, different sorts of oat cakes, different sorts of barley bread, rye bread, all mixed together. And every region had its own specialities. There wasn't one standard bread across Britain. But it was a thing that most people ate most often. For many people, it was their...
I'm not going to be able to concentrate until I find this out. Oh. So it is similar to, like, how wheat... Much like wheat. Okay. All right. Sorry. That was going to drive me crazy.
their main food, breakfast, dinner. For many people, it was their main food, breakfast, dinner, and supper. But even for the very wealthy, it formed the basis upon which everything else built. This is a time, remember, before potatoes, before there was widespread rice, before there was pasta. The carbohydrates that people ate were almost exclusively coming from grain in the form of one type of bread or another. So bread is deeply important to people, but it's not the only other food. The next most important food for most of us was something called pottage, which just means cooked in a pot. It's enormously varied, even more than the bread. Super seasonal. So what I might cook today would be completely different from what I'd be cooking in a fortnight's time as different ingredients come to the fore.
But eat them as they're fresh.
You might think to yourself, yeah, I know about plants changing through the season, but it's not just the plant.
I feel like I was just called out.
Yeah, I know about plants changing through the season, but it's not just the plants. In Tudor times, meat, fish, and eggs, and cheese, and butter all had a season of their own.
Okay.
So, for example, take the milk. Nowadays, we have milk all the way round the year, but that is not the Tudor pattern. Cows went dry in the winter when there wasn't much food available for them, and you then have to wait until they'd had a calf before they came into milk again. So the milk season ran from March, round about then, through to about October. And even within that, there are subtleties. So that first flush of milk, when the grass is first springing up and is lush and green, well, that milk is very high in fat, which makes it extremely good for butter making. So butter is a sort of spring and early summer thing, unless you salt it. So it tastes different later in the year. Fresh butter in the spring, salted butter later on. However, as the grass changes, as the weather moves on through the seasons, the nutrition that the cows are getting begins to shift. So whilst that early flush of grass made very fatty milk, very creamy milk, later in the summer, the milk contains more caseins, and that makes it perfect for cheese making. So early spring, you'd make lots of butter, and then you'd only start to make your cheese once the spring really got going. So maybe not till June, and then you'd cheese make through the rest of the year.
This is one of the times I realized just how different it is nowadays. I mean, having to put all this thought into what food is best and what time of the year, and trying to get, trying to organize that in a calendar to know when you should eat certain things, both for when they're best to be made and just so that you have food year round, is just something that I feel like we are so far removed from. Fascinating. So there are seasons to your dairy produce. Same with your eggs. The chickens don't lay when there's low light levels. They're sparked into laying by the pituitary gland, which notices how much daylight there is. Now, in a modern world, we put them in sheds and we give them artificial light so that they'll lay all the year round. But that's not possible in Tudor England. In Tudor England, eggs are seasonal too. I wonder if that makes for more eggs, but less quality eggs, maybe? If, like, they're always just, oh, it's daylight, the light's pushing out. you know?
They start when the sun is high enough in the sky and the day length is long enough, and it stops as the nights draw in. So again, eggs are seasonal. So too are our meats. If you think about it, it doesn't make sense to kill a cow if she's in calf. You would wait to a different part of the year. It would be sensible to slaughter your animals. And there's a sort of rhythm through the year of which animals you take when, according
What about
to
the male
what sort of
animal?
foods they're eating and how you're managing them. So Easter, for example, was the time for lamb. If you had a spare lamb or one that wasn't looking too good and you decided that one's going to go, that's the moment you would eat it. The only time of the year you'd eat a lamb, Easter, something special. For the rest of the year, you'd wait then, not eat any sheep at all, until they'd been sheared. And after they've been sheared and you've made the money off their wool, then the oldest ewes, who you don't think will have good wool next year, that's when you eat them as mutton. And you can see that this pattern follows everything. Fishes in the sea, just the same. Different shoals come through at different times of the year, so there is an ebb and a flow to which things are turning up in fishermen's nets. And yes, you can preserve things. Salt cod,
Salt. Yeah.
pickled herring, smoked kippers.
Fried.
These are things that can be had all year round, but people tend to use them when there's not much fresh. So they tend to get eaten in the late winter in particular, or Lent when you're not allowed to eat meat. So there's a huge seasonality. No 2 weeks of the Tudor diet are the same. Meat, fish, eggs, cheese, butter, all of it, as well as the vegetables.
So you probably get a more varied diet than you would have if you didn't have to do all of these things, which I'm sure is going to put into why they might have had healthier diets than you would think. Is that you're kind of forced to get all of the nutrients from a bunch of different foods that'll have different nutrients that you need because of this cycle. So see how that could be healthy.
And the fruit have a season. So
Yeah.
when I'm deciding on my pottage, the list of ingredients that I've got to me is very specific to this week of the year. And next week's selection of ingredients will be completely different. So my pottage will change. The word stays the same. We say, oh, we're eating bread and pottage. But every single week throughout the year, that pottage is going to be completely different. Sometimes it's going to be full of a fish, sometimes of one meat, sometimes another meat, sometimes this vegetable, sometimes that. It's always changing. And the range of herbs and vegetables that the Tudors grew in their garden was wide. Most people are unable to go to a vegetable shop. There weren't really vegetable shops. You could buy meat at market, you could buy all sorts of things at market, but there weren't really much market gardening in a commercial way. You were reliant on your own garden generally for your fruit and veg. And people therefore have to think about, well, I need to eat this week, I need to eat next week, I need to eat the week after. It's no point having a bumper crop of carrots if they all come at once. They're going to go off. And meanwhile, you've had nothing while you're waiting for that bumper crop. Better to have a garden that has a huge variety, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of the other, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. That will all ripen and be ready for picking at different moments, so that at any week in the year, there's always a bit of something to go in your pottage to flavour it in yet another different combination. So weirdly, although it sounds super boring, most people are living on bread and pottage. Weirdly, the Tudor diet is...
Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
Sorry, guys. I'll react to that. Sure. That was my other video getting finished. Sorry about that.
People are living on bread and pottage. Weirdly, the Tudor diet is actually quite varied.
Yeah, so just to reiterate one thing I said is that, if your favorite food, your favorite vegetable is carrots, your favorite foods are carrots and mutton, right? And they're available all year round, let's say. Well, then you might just always eat that, and you're not going to get the nutrients that are in a bunch of the other foods. So the lack of year-round choice could actually actually forces you to get a more varied diet with more varied nutrients and vitamins that could make you even healthier than if you had more options, you know? Where? In home?
The Tudor era is a moment of enormous change in the kitchen.
Where are these?
We are going to utterly change the way we cook, the fuel that we cook on, the equipment that we use, and ultimately the food that we produce. So this is an odd fireplace at a moment caught in the middle of change.
You could bring me into this room with no context, and I wouldn't know if I'm cooking something or being tortured. Because
it's neither one thing at a moment caught in the middle of change. It's neither one thing nor the other, but a strange mashup of two systems. So the older system, the more established system, and to be fair, for most of the Tudor times, the most common system was to be burning wood. This whole great structure with an enormous amount of space is designed for cooking with wood. The fire would be just on the floor down there, and this would not have been present. This comes later. We'll come to this later. Imagine the fire in the centre with that nice iron back there.
Like
this is for holding the spit. You can see both sides.
And keep everything from burning down. Okay, I gotta stop talking.
Comes later. We'll come to this later.
Okay.
Imagine the fire in the centre with that nice iron back there. This is for holding the spit. You can see both sides, and here we've got a little spit on it here, but as you can see, it could go in many different places so that you could move the spit to where you wanted, to change the heat, to change how many things you're cooking at once, where you're cooking, to give you a bit of flexibility when it comes to roasting. So we've got a great big tray underneath to catch all the juices that drip from the meat, all the fat
nice
and
gravy.
the gravy.
Mm.
If we wanted to boil a pot, we'd be using something like this with its little legs, and we could actually stand this down next to the fire at the
Yeah, it seems a bit high. I mean, heat rises for that to boil very quickly.
side on the ground, or we can hang it, whichever works best. The great big space means that I can have more than one fire, or I can change the shape of the fire. If I've got a wooden fire, I don't have to have it just in the middle. I could have a little fire there and another fire there, so that I got a little cool bit for doing perhaps my sauces and another bigger bit for boiling a big pot. I could move the fire together, I can spread it out. I can make it very intense in one area and more gentle in another. Having all this space, a fire fork, some tongs, these sorts of things to move it around, just gives me huge flexibility and allows me to cook lots of different things at once. And you'll notice also I've got pottery cooking pots, which work perfectly well on wood. The heat suits them. You just warm them up gently, cool them down gently. They're cheap and they're easy to produce. So this then is the older system, but that is all changing as we begin in the late Tudor period to start bringing coal into our kitchens. It starts in London and other places that are very close to a coal supply. I mean, obviously there's no mines in London. The coal that they were using actually came from Newcastle. They put the coal there sort of is right on the cliff faces, down the rivers and even on the sea. So you can sort of take your coal very easily with very simple mining.
I heard there was a saying in England to mean like doing a pointless task is like taking coal to Newcastle. So that's interesting.
Pop it straight in a boat and just sail it all the way around into London. So coal in London came from Newcastle. But, I mean, up in this part of the country, it's a bit more direct, isn't it? In anywhere with a coal field of its own, we're beginning to think about the idea of using coal instead of wood. And this is the sort of equipment that they came up with to sort it out. Because if you try and have a coal fire straight on the floor, you're going to have trouble. It ain't going to work very well. You've got to lift it up to get the air all the way around it. Otherwise it just smoulders and you get no heat from it at all. So people start to come up with grates. This is an early one. And you can see that the coal went in this bit here. And then they want some element of the controllability that they used to have with wood. So they put these bits in. These are called cheeks. And you can probably see there's a handle there to wind them in and out. So that I could have a fire that was bigger or a fire that was smaller, according to what I'm cooking. And now the pots have to hang because I can't put them directly on the coal. And you can see that this no longer fits. If I tried to roast by putting my spit along here, if all my coal was in there, it wouldn't really work. So everything has to be sort of redesigned in order to work with the coal. It's a major shift, a big investment. And some houses don't do it for another century or more. But the beginnings of a major change are happening here, and it's going to reach out and change the British diet forever. We're going to find that the old wood staples, things like the pottage, have to give way to things more like boiled puddings, spotted dick.
Spotted dick? Eat it when it's fresh.
Now, the Tudors may not have had fridges in their kitchen, but they had no shortage of ways to preserve their food safely. This is a very simple one, but effective. You can see it's a just sort of wooden box, but notice how much ventilation it is. Everywhere you look, up, above and around, it's slatted so that air can move through. You'll also notice that it's suspended on ropes. Now, should some mice or similar problems get into your house, and it happens, doesn't it? This means that they can't get at anything in there overnight because they can't climb onto the roof and down the ropes and round. The overhangs just make it impossible for them. So this is a rodent-proof safe with loads and loads of airflow so that nothing is going to get damp and therefore mouldy. And it's designed for keeping bread, oatcakes, pies, biscuits, that sort of a thing. The sort of things that do best in an aired environment, things that would go mouldy if they were enclosed, things that a little tiny hints of smoke in the air will help. Don't want too much smoke. We're not trying to smoke the bread. But a little bit there keeps the flies off. And it's up, out of the way of anything else. But there are plenty of other methods for other sorts of food, as we'll see as we move around.
So salt, I'm assuming, is another. So when it comes to preserving food that will go bad, is just extracting and keeping as much moisture out of it as possible. Put it in as least a damp enclosed area as possible. And same thing for salt, is salt sucks water out of anything that is encased around it, right? So I'm assuming she's going to say salt, maybe something else.
So obviously this is quite a grand house, but on a much smaller scale, the same processes go on pretty much every home. If you've got meat, you've got to preserve it. So we salt or we smoke. Barrels of salt meat were a staple for many people. And it's not a difficult process. Once you've butchered your carcass, you cut it up into suitable sized pieces. You rub salt all over it. Perhaps mix in a little bit of saltpeter or some bay leaves or maybe even a little bit of spice if you can. And then pack
Saltpeter. Why is that familiar? Is that what's used in dynamite or gunpowder?
it, bay leaves, or maybe even a little bit of spice if you can, and then pack it in a barrel with more salt on top. And in that way, you can keep meat, well, quite safely for months at a time. I mean, we all know bacon keeps well, don't we? Now, this is a flower
True.
arc, and not only does it keep your flower safe from bugs or mice or anything like that, but the thick wood of its construction provides the perfect humidity, the perfect insulation to keep your flower in good condition. On top of that, the lid comes off, turns upside down, and makes the absolute perfect trough for working your dough. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Next time we'll be opening the Tudor wardrobe to discover what fashions were in vogue in the 16th century. Don't forget, you can watch all episodes of my Tudor Life series by downloading the History Extra app.
It was a great video. Another example of how people, I think sometimes people, and myself included, can think people in the past were just not as smart as people during today. It's like we have like we're very capable throughout time and work and do very ingenious things with what we have to work with. And so in a sense, you could say that we're less ingenious. I don't know if I want to go that far, but people are ingenious, and we work out how to do. I mean, look at the pyramids. How the hell did they build those? Alien? No, it wasn't aliens. But just that, I think that we underestimate. I don't want to speak for everyone. We underestimate the intelligence of people throughout time, and it's like intelligence isn't measured by the advancement of your technology. It relies on like what you do with what you're given and what you can accomplish. And this is a great example of that. Loved it. Love learning about this stuff. Thanks for the recommendation, Rain. Very good. Love you all. Hope you're all doing well. Would appreciate any comments down below, answering any of my questions, telling me if I was wrong. Certainly a possibility. Would love to see it. Hopefully see you guys next time. We'll keep on learning together. Bye, guys.